I'm here with Tony Simons, who is with the World Agroforestry Center, also known as ICRAF. And Tony is the Director General of ICRAF. So I'm glad to get the opportunity to ask you some questions, Tony, because you've said in the past that there's a need for the private sector to get involved in sustainable forestry and restoration. I'm wondering if you can tell us, how do you achieve that? How do you get the private participation into the picture?
Great question, Augusta. Thanks very much. So we've got a large scale of ambition and a large scale of a problem. So the Bonn Challenge laid out 150 million hectares. The New York Declaration, 350 million hectares. We know we've got between 2 and 3 billion hectares of land to restore. So the scale of the ambition is enormous. And yet on the other end, we've got a whole lot of small projects. So either we have one of two options, and it's not either or, we can do those together. So to combine a lot of small projects, and many of these will be led by the private sector, and to aggregate those small projects. So financiers are really good at aggregating different forms of finance, but we've not been good at aggregating smaller projects. And the private sector can help in this with sharing information about design parameters. We see a lot of funds and a lot of initiatives die on the inability to weave in really good design costs, 1 to 5% of the value of a project for it to be well designed. And if we can have co-design, if we can share information and have platforms where in certain jurisdictions and with certain approaches, that common design element can run through them. And I think that a lot of the ESG and the standards being put out, and interestingly, on this Friday, the Climate Bonds Initiative is going to release the forestry standard, the draft standard for consultation and guidance, which will be fantastic. Yeah. And when we look at the IFC and the World Bank issuing new bonds and sustainability measures to try and have a much larger scale, it will help the private sector see the benefit. But let's look at forest landscapes, because at the moment national governments in developing countries struggle to exploit those assets. They're $10,000 a hectare value, but the revenue is less than $100 a year. So we're not getting the revenue from that asset. And if we can see higher revenues by bringing in those positive externalities that forests give us on hydrological monitoring, ecosystem services, etc., and make a business case for transforming those landscapes. Not just that it's about restoration and that's it, but let's turning it into a productive and profitable and sustainable and socially inclusive and well-governed landscape. That will be the pull, that will be the signal that private sector sees. Wow, we can exploit and source our value chains for a lot of those very valuable commodities at the same time as making those landscapes more resilient.
Right, and so that means you've actually sort of gone into my next question, which is what opportunities do you see? You've actually described a few opportunities that could come out of this sharing of design and information. The bonds you were mentioning, are these the sustainability bonds, or is our sustainability bond something that already exists that an investor could think about buying?
If we're to have this, Augusta, this influence at scale, we've got to get really well designed, have the right partners, mobilize the right finance, and have the outcomes aligned with the intent of the bond and the national governments. The governments, these are jurisdictional authorities, subnational and national, who have sovereign right over their resources and the direction, the development of their country. So we've got to get the finance and the actors and the project implementators aligned with those national priorities and aligned with the sovereign issues and aspirations of those countries. If we can do that at scale, that provides us a much greater opportunity. So these bonds, I mean, if we have junk ideas, we're going to end up with junk bonds. And so we've got to get really well-designed and integrated ideas coming together, sharing those information sources to design these bonds. We've with United Nations Environment Program, with BNP Paribas, with ADM Capital and ADM Capital Foundation, our organization, the World Agroforestry Center, has helped develop this new tropical landscape finance facility. And our first issue was a $95 million bond that was issued with 3 different maturities to transform jungle rubber and plantation rubber in Jambi in Sumatra, to look at how we could look at conservation, look at increased production together. So these bonds have a great opportunity, and because there was a US government guarantee behind that, the second largest guarantee given to any single project, it provided that impetus for private sector and other actors to come in and say, right, we're investing our money, we're putting up money at first, but we want to have that shared risk across that bond, and investors then see that, wow, this is a great financial return, but it's also got really brilliant environmental and social dividends attached to it.
That all sounds great, meeting that triple bottom line, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, thanks very much, Tony, for telling us about this. It's super interesting, and it's been really great talking to you. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Investment Case Symposium today.
Great, thanks very much. And this Global Landscape Forum is a unique convening, bringing together landscape. And I would urge everyone to get engaged with it, because when we come together at that level and in this convening safe space, we can really make a difference. Thank you.